Elena stared at her phone, scanning the latest tech industry headlines. Privacy cause Chen courts controversy. Romance with security consultant raises eyebrows. The article beneath was filled with thinly veiled insinuations about her motives for working with James's company. She closed the browser and gazed out her office window. The past month of collaboration with Privacy Corps had been intensely productive and increasingly complicated. Every time James brought her coffee during late-night coding sessions or their hands brushed while reviewing security protocols, the professional walls between them felt thinner. Her phone buzzed with a text from James. "Have you seen the article?" "Hard to miss," she typed back, then added, "I'm used to criticism. We should talk. Dinner?" Elena's finger hovered over the reply button. Dinner felt like crossing a line she wasn't sure she was ready to cross. The memory of Marcus's betrayal wasn't just a wound, it had become a shield. "Rain check," she responded finally. Deadline for the encryption upgrade. In his penthouse office across the city, James read her message and set his phone down with a quiet sigh. He understood her hesitation better than she knew. The view from his window encompassed the tech empire he'd built, but success had taught him harsh lessons about trust. His assistant knocked and entered. "Mr. Chen, the board is concerned about the media speculation. They're suggesting we distance the company from Ms. Martinez's consultancy." "Not happening," James replied, his tone leaving no room for discussion. But alone again, he questioned his judgment. Was he letting personal feelings compromise his business instincts? Later that week, they found themselves working late again, the office empty except for them. Elena was explaining a security modification when she noticed James's distraction. "You're not listening," she observed. "I'm thinking about the board meeting tomorrow," he admitted. "They're worried about perception." Elena stiffened. "If you need to end our contract." "That's not what I want," James interrupted, then caught himself. "Professionally or otherwise." The moment hung between them, heavy with unspoken possibilities. "I can't be the consultant who fell for her billionaire client," Elena said finally, her voice quiet but firm. "I spent years building my reputation. And I can't be the CEO who let his heart compromise his judgment," James responded. Even though? He met her eyes. "Even though that's exactly what's happening." Elena turned back to her laptop, but her fingers remained still on the keyboard. "We should focus on the project." "Of course," James agreed, but neither moved to continue working. The silence stretched between them, filled with the hum of computers and the weight of things unsaid. Both recognized the irony. They'd built careers on protecting others' privacy, but now their own private feelings threatened everything they'd worked for. As the city lights twinkled outside, they remained in their professional roles. The emergency alert came at 3 a.m. Elena's phone erupted with a specific ringtone she'd hoped never to hear, the one she'd set for critical security breaches. Within minutes, she was remote connecting to Privacy Corps systems, her heart racing as lines of malicious code scrolled across her screen. "James, we're looking at a level 5 breach." She spoke into her headset, already throwing on clothes while maintaining eye contact with her laptop. "The attack pattern, it's familiar." "I'm on my way to the office." His voice was tense but controlled. "How bad?" "Bad." Elena grabbed her keys. "They're targeting the core privacy infrastructure. If they succeed, every user's personal data will be exposed. Millions of people, James." 20 minutes later, she rushed into Privacy Corps' crisis center. James was already there, his usual polished appearance replaced by a rumpled t-shirt and jeans. Their eyes met across the room, sharing a moment of unspoken understanding before diving into the crisis. Elena's fingers flew across the keyboard, her mind racing faster than her hands could move. "The attack signature," she muttered. "I've seen it before." Then it hit her. "Oh God." James moved to her station. "What is it?" "This is Marcus's work," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "The same pattern he used at Cybershield, but evolved. More sophisticated." Her hands trembled slightly, but her typing never slowed. He must have started developing this before he was arrested. James's hand found her shoulder, steadying her. "Elena, if this is too personal. No, she cut him off, her voice finding its strength. I'm the best chance we have at stopping this. I know how he thinks. For the next hours, they worked in perfect synchronization. Elena anticipated the attack's movements, while James coordinated their defense team. When she needed resources, they appeared before she asked. When he needed technical insight, she provided it instantly. There, Elena said finally, pointing to a section of code. He always hid a backdoor in his attacks, a way to prove it was his work. Her voice held a mix of pain and determination. We can use it against him. James leaned in, their shoulders touching as they stared at the screen. Show me. As the sun rose over San Francisco, they finally contained the breach. Elena sat back, exhausted but satisfied. No user data had been compromised. You did it, James said softly. We did it, she corrected, turning to face him. In the morning light, with their guards down from exhaustion and adrenaline, the walls between them felt paper thin. Elena, he started, then paused. I need to tell you something. When I saw it was your ex-fiance's work, I was afraid. Afraid I'd run, she asked, meeting his gaze. Afraid you'd think I'd see you differently, as vulnerable, needing protection. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. But watching you work tonight, you're the strongest person I know. The sincerity in his voice made her breath catch. For the first time since Marcus's betrayal, Elena felt truly seen, not as a... Elena Martinez sat in her corner office at CyberShield Solutions, staring at the lines of code on her screen until they blurred into meaningless symbols. The evidence was undeniable, yet her mind struggled to accept what she was seeing. Marcus, her fiancé of 2 years, had been using her company credentials to access classified client information for months. The discovery had started with a simple anomaly in the security logs, late-night access to client files from an unauthorized IP address. As CyberShield's lead security consultant, Elena had personally designed the monitoring system that caught the breach. She'd spent 3 days tracking the digital breadcrumbs, each one leading her closer to a truth she wasn't prepared to face. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the encrypted messages she'd uncovered. Marcus had been selling corporate secrets to competing firms, using the trust she'd placed in him, both professional and personal, to bypass security protocols. The wedding invitations, ironically featuring intertwined binary code in their design, had been mailed out just last week. Elena, Sarah, her assistant, appeared in the doorway. The FBI agents are here. Drawing a deep breath, Elena straightened her charcoal blazer and stood. She'd contacted the authorities the moment she'd verified her findings, pushing aside the crushing weight of betrayal to do what was right. Her reputation, built over a decade of dedicated work in cybersecurity, hung by a thread. The meeting lasted 3 hours. Elena walked the agents through her discovery, her voice steady even as she detailed how Marcus had first asked about her work protocols during what she thought were innocent pillow talk conversations. She provided documentation showing how he'd gradually gathered information about her security clearances, presenting a timeline of his systematic betrayal. That evening, as the sun set over the San Francisco skyline, Elena sat alone in her apartment, surrounded by half-packed boxes of wedding decorations. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from concerned friends and family. The news had already started to spread. Marcus had been arrested at his office, the evidence too overwhelming for denial. Looking at their engagement photo on the mantel, Elena felt a complex mix of emotions. There was heartbreak, yes, but also anger, not just at the betrayal of their relationship, but at the calculated way he used her expertise for his gain. She'd spent years building systems to protect people's digital lives, and he'd exploited that very protection. Taking the photo down, Elena placed it face down in a box marked Donations. Tomorrow, she would face questions from clients, journalists, and colleagues. But tonight, she allowed herself to grieve, not for the loss of Marcus, she realized, but for the trust she'd given so freely. As she poured herself a glass of wine, Elena made a silent promise to herself. She would emerge from this stronger, wiser, and more committed than ever to protecting others. 1 year after the cyber attack that had brought them together, Elena stood in her new office, surveying the space that would soon house Martina's security solutions. The downtown view couldn't rival Privacy Corps, but it was hers, earned through her own merit and determination. The servers arrive tomorrow, she told James, who was examining the blueprint for her planned security operations center. I still can't believe we found space in this building. I can't believe you wouldn't let me help with the lease, he teased, though his pride in her independence was evident. You know why, Elena replied, booting up her workstation. Though I do appreciate the mentor sessions. Your experience with scaling operations has been invaluable. James moved to stand beside her, watching as she initiated her company's security protocols. Speaking of which, have you considered my suggestion about the distributed backup system? Already implemented my own version, she said with a grin. Check the secondary encryption layer. He leaned in, studying the code, then laughed. Brilliant. You've improved on my design. Learned from the best, Elena said, turning to face him, but made it my own. Their eyes met, and James reached into his pocket. That's actually why I wanted to stop by today. He pulled out a small box, but instead of dropping to one knee, he simply held it out to her. I've been carrying this around for weeks, waiting for the right moment. Then I realized, this is it. You building your dream, completely on your own terms. This is exactly who you are, who I fell in love with. Elena opened the box to find not just a ring, but also a broken watch, his father's. James, the ring is because I want to spend my life with you, he said softly. The watch is because I want you to know that I see you, all of you. Your strength, your scars, your determination to succeed on your own terms. I'm not trying to fix you or protect you. I just want to build a life with you as equals. Elena touched the watch gently, understanding its significance. I supposed I could make room for a co-developer in my life's code, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I promise to always respect your administrative privileges, James replied, making her laugh through tears. Yes, she said simply, slipping on the ring. It caught the light from her computer screens, throwing patterns across the walls like lines of code. They spent the rest of the afternoon setting up her office, discussing security protocols and future plans. When her first employee arrived for orientation the next day, they found Elena at her desk, wearing both a new ring and an old broken watch, symbols of a partnership built on respect, understanding, and the courage to be vulnerable without losing strength. As Elena led her team through their first briefing, James watched from the back of the room, content in the knowledge that they had found something rare, a love that didn't require either of them to be left. In the aftermath of the crisis, Elena and James found themselves in his office as dawn painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. The crisis management team had gone home, leaving them alone with cooling cups of coffee and the weight of unspoken words. You never asked me how it happened, Elena said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. With Marcus. James set down his coffee. I figured you'd tell me when you were ready. She smiled faintly at his response. That's part of why I think I can tell you now. Moving to the window, Elena watched the city come alive below. Everyone else demanded explanations, treated me like either a victim or a fool. But you just waited. I know something about people wanting explanations you're not ready to give, he replied, joining her at the window, but maintaining a respectful distance. Elena took a deep breath. I thought I was smart enough not to be fooled. That's the irony. My pride in my intelligence made me vulnerable. Marcus knew exactly how to play to that. She turned to face James. He'd ask questions about my work, framed them as admiration for my expertise. Each little piece of information seemed harmless until you put them all together. James listened intently, his expression thoughtful. Intelligence and trust aren't mutually exclusive, Elena. Believing in someone doesn't make you naive. Your turn, she said softly. What explanations are you tired of giving? He was quiet for a long moment. How about why the billionaire tech CEO still keeps a broken watch in his desk drawer? Opening a drawer, he pulled out an old digital watch, its face cracked. It was my father's. He repaired electronics in a tiny shop in Singapore. could fix anything except this watch. James turned the watch over in his hands. He died before he could finish it. I was 15, and suddenly I was responsible for my mother and 2 younger sisters. Started coding at night after helping Mom run the repair shop during the day. He gave a slight, self-deprecating smile. Now I have people who want to know my secrets to success, expecting some brilliant strategy. How do I tell them it was just fear of letting my family go hungry? Elena reached out, her fingers brushing his as she touched the watch. That's why you created Privacy Core. To protect people who can't protect themselves? Everyone deserves a safe space to become who they're meant to be, he said, echoing their earlier conversation. My father gave us that, even when we had nothing else. Their hands were still touching, the broken watch between them. Elena felt the last of her walls crumbling. I stopped wearing watches after Marcus, she admitted. Couldn't stand the reminder of time I'd wasted with him. And now? James asked quietly. Now I'm thinking maybe it's time to start again. She met his eyes. With someone who understands that trust isn't about blind faith, but about choosing to be vulnerable with the right person. James carefully set the watch down and turned to fully face her. I'd like that, he said simply. And in those The Singapore Conference Center buzzed with activity as cybersecurity professionals from around the world gathered for the annual Digital Defense Summit. Elena stood backstage, reviewing her presentation slides one final time. 3 months had passed since Marcus's arrest, and this was her first major public appearance since the incident. Ms. Martinez, you're up in 5 minutes, a staff member informed her, offering a reassuring smile. Elena nodded, smoothing her navy blue dress. She'd chosen this conference specifically because it focused on emerging threats in cybersecurity, including insider attacks. Rather than hide from her experience, she'd decided to transform it into a teaching moment. The lights dimmed, and Elena took the stage. Her presentation, Trust as a Security Vulnerability, Detecting and Preventing Insider Threats, commanded attention from the first slide. She moved through the technical aspects with precision, her voice never wavering as she incorporated anonymized elements from her own experience to illustrate the real-world impact of security breaches. During the Q&A session, a journalist stood up. Given your personal experience with security breaches, how can companies trust your judgment in protecting their data? Before Elena could respond, another voice cut through the tension. Perhaps the better question is, who better to identify vulnerabilities than someone who's faced them firsthand? Elena turned toward the voice. James Chen, founder of Privacy Core Technologies, sat in the third row. His intervention was surprising. He was known for avoiding controversy, yet here he was, publicly supporting her position. Later that evening, seeking escape from the conference's networking events, Elena found herself at the Maxwell Road Hawker Center. The humid Singapore air carried the mingled aromas of laksa, char kway teow, and dozens of other local dishes. She was deliberating between stalls when a familiar voice spoke behind her. The char kway teow at stall 32 is exceptional, James Chen said, gesturing to an elderly vendor who was expertly working his wok. Though I might be biased, Mr. Tan has been feeding me since before I could afford a proper office. Elena studied him with careful interest. In person, James Chen was different from his media persona. His simple linen shirt and relaxed demeanor contrasted sharply with the polished tech mogul image cultivated by PR teams. They ended up sharing a table, their conversation flowing naturally from cybersecurity to their shared experiences of building careers from scratch. James spoke of growing up in a small apartment above a repair shop, while Elena shared stories of learning to code on a second-hand computer. Your presentation today, James said, twirling noodles with practiced chopstick skills. It took courage to turn a personal setback into a learning opportunity for others. Hiding it would have meant letting him win twice, Elena replied, surprised by her own candor. James nodded, understanding in his eyes. Sometimes our greatest innovations come from our deepest challenges. He hesitated, then added, my company's been developing a new privacy protocol. I'd value your perspective on it, if you're interested. Elena found herself smiling. recognizing the professional respect in his offer. "I'd need to know more about the project first." "Of course," James agreed, his eyes crinkling with genuine warmth. Tetch's power couple, romance or corporate strategy. The headline glared from Elena's tablet as she prepared for her keynote speech at the Women in Tech conference. 3 months into their relationship, the media had turned their every move into fodder for speculation. "Ready?" James asked, straightening his tie in the green room mirror. He'd been invited to introduce her speech, a decision that had sparked yet another round of commentary about their professional boundaries. "Born ready," Elena replied, making final adjustments to her presentation. "Though I'm pretty sure half the audience is here to see if I'll announce our engagement or a corporate merger." James chuckled, but his eyes were concerned. "We could have declined the joint appearance and feed the narrative that we're hiding something." Elena stood, smoothing her blazer. "I spent my career proving I belong in this industry. I'm not about to start avoiding opportunities because of relationship gossip." The auditorium was packed when James took the stage. "Today's speaker needs no introduction," he began, "but she deserves one. Elena Martinez's contributions to cybersecurity have protected millions of users worldwide. Her recent work on quantum-resistant encryption protocols has set new industry standards." I could list her achievements, but instead, I'll simply say, her brilliance continues to challenge and inspire me, both professionally and personally. As Elena took the stage, their brief handshakes sparked a flurry of camera flashes. She launched into her presentation on emerging security threats, her expertise commanding the room. During the Q&A, a reporter stood up. "Ms. Martinez, how do you respond to suggestions that your relationship with James Chen has given you unfair advantages in the industry?" The room tensed, but Elena smiled. "I secured my first major contracts and developed my core security protocols long before I met James. My work speaks for itself. As for advantages, yes, dating one of Tech's most innovative minds has its perks. I get to debate encryption algorithms over breakfast." The audience laughed. "But anyone who thinks that makes my job easier has never tried to convince James Chen that his code needs debugging." From the front row, James grinned, appreciating how she'd turned the question on its head without diminishing either of them. Later that evening, they walked along the waterfront, away from the cameras and speculation. "That was masterfully handled," James said. "I learned from watching you," Elena replied. "All those press conferences where you refused to let them reduce you to just your net worth." "It's strange," he mused. "Everyone assumes I'm the one with the power in this relationship, just because of my wealth. They don't see how your strength, your integrity, challenges me to be better." Elena squeezed his hand. "Let them talk. We know what we're building together." A passing couple recognized them, phones quickly emerging for photos. Instead of turning away, Elena and James continued their walk, hands clasped, heads together in conversation. Let the photos show the truth. Two professionals, equally accomplished, choosing to. 2 weeks after Singapore, Elena found herself in Privacy Corps' San Francisco headquarters, surrounded by holographic displays of the company's new security architecture. The glass-walled conference room offered a stunning view of the bay, but her attention was fixed on the complex web of protocols before her. "The vulnerability isn't in the encryption," Elena murmured, more to herself than to James, who stood nearby. She manipulated the holographic display, spinning a section of code to examine it from different angles. "It's in the handshake sequence between servers." James moved closer, his shoulder nearly touching hers as he studied the section she'd highlighted. "Most people would have missed that," he said, admiration evident in his voice. "We've had 4 security firms review this protocol. They were looking for complex threats," Elena explained, pulling up another section of code. "Sometimes the biggest vulnerabilities hide in plain sight, like a door that looks securely locked but has loose hinges." The metaphor drew a thoughtful nod from James. They'd been working together for hours, their initial formal discussion evolving into a collaborative deep dive into Privacy Corps systems. Elena appreciated how James engaged with her ideas, challenging them not to assert dominance, but to strengthen the final solution. "Watch this," Elena said, fingers flying across the keyboard. She initiated a simulation, demonstrating how a seemingly secure connection could be compromised. James leaned in, his expression intense as he followed her logic. "Brilliant," he breathed, then caught himself and stepped back slightly, maintaining professional distance. "Would you consider leading the team to implement these fixes?" Elena paused, aware of the weight of the offer. "As a consultant," she clarified, "I need to maintain my independence." "Of course," James agreed immediately. "I wouldn't want it any other way." Their eyes met briefly, both recognizing the layers in that exchange. Elena had learned to be cautious about mixing professional and personal relationships, while James clearly respected her boundaries. As they worked late into the evening, they ordered Chinese takeout. Over containers of kung pao chicken and hot and sour soup, the conversation drifted from work to more personal territory. "Why privacy?" Elena asked, genuinely curious about what drove him. James was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "I grew up with nothing," he finally said. "But even then, I had my thoughts, my dreams. Privacy isn't about hiding. It's about having space to be yourself, to grow into who you want to become. Everyone deserves that." Elena found herself nodding. "It's about protection, not secrecy," she added, thinking of her own experiences. "Exactly," James said softly, looking at her with an intensity that made her heart skip. But he didn't push, didn't try to turn the moment into something more. Instead, he reached for the code display again. "Show me more about that handshake sequence." Elena smiled, appreciating both his interest and his restraint. They worked together until midnight, their professional